At 10:45 p.m, Louise Aitchison picked up her phone and dialed 999. Her voice was calm, measured, even polite. She told officers she needed help getting her boyfriend to leave. He was being difficult. He was being intimidating. He just would not go. Police arrived at her East Kilbride flat and spoke with both of them. They didn't run a background check. They didn't mention his history. They didn't know, or didn't remember, that Louise had already been flagged as at risk. So they let Darryl Paterson walk out, free to collect his things later, and then all hell broke loose. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple uploads every single week. In fact, right now I'm doing Monday to Friday. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then make sure you join the Dark Case family now by hitting subscribe and turning all notifications on. And now for today's silly little question. If someone had to play you in a movie, who would you cast and why? Let me know down in the comments. All of your support over on Patreon, as well as right here via channel memberships on YouTube, are so appreciated, and I really can't thank you all enough. However, thank you. But now, on with the video. In early 2020, Louise Aitchison was trying to rebuild her life. She'd been stalked and harassed by her former partner, and the trauma of that ordeal had led to one good thing: a relocation. Her new flat on Park Terrace in East Kilbride was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where she could feel safe once again. To make this even better, she now lived just 2 closes down from her mother. She still walked her dog every day. She was reconnecting with her friends. She was smiling more, beginning to enjoy life once again, and then she met someone new. This new guy's name was Darryl Paterson. They crossed paths whilst walking their dogs. It all seemed pretty innocent, pretty harmless. They both loved animals, and Louise, with her enormous heart, saw something in him. She liked him so much that he moved in by March. But what Louise didn't know, and what nobody told her, was that Paterson already had convictions for DV in 2016 and 2017. And worse even still, he was facing new allegations from a previous partner at the time that he entered Louise's life. Less than a month after moving in, the signs were already there. Police were called to the flat on March the 24th. An officer, alarmed by Paterson's presence and known history, then submitted a formal request under Scotland's domestic abuse disclosure scheme. It's called a power to tell application. It allows police to proactively warn a person if their partner poses a known risk. So really, this sounds like an amazing idea. The officer flagged it, and a decision was made to tell Louise. The warning meant for Louise sat dormant in a system designed to protect her. It had been formally approved on April the 9th. That's when police officers agreed, yes, she needed to know. She had a right to be told that the man in her flat had a documented history of violence against women. Under police guidelines, that kind of disclosure must be made within 10 days. But when officers logged that report, they left out some crucial details. There was no incident number. There was no current mobile number. There was no confirmation of address. So all of this meant when another officer tried to follow up 14 days later, on April the 23rd, they couldn't even reach her. They attempted a phone call, but with no correct number on file, the effort failed before it began. And then there was no further attempt. The system did not flag the missed deadline. There was no red alert. Nobody noticed the oversight. And because the form lacked an incident number, other officers couldn't even find it unless they knew exactly where to look. But they didn't. So Louise was never warned. Even on the night that Louise called 999 herself and asked officers to remove Paterson from her flat, the responding officer didn't mention any of this to her. They just let Paterson leave. They logged the call as always, and then they left her there. According to Police Scotland's own watchdog, the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, or PIRC, This failure was critical. Had she been told about Paterson's background, the report stated, she may have taken action to avoid him and ensure her safety. But by the time this disclosure was due, Darryl Paterson had already told officers he intended to return to the flat to pick up his stuff, admitting that he had no intention of staying away. Later, Police Scotland would defend their decision not to disclose this at the time of the 999 call, saying that it may not have been appropriate. But Louise's mother, Caroline Leon, later said they might as well have put a target on her back, because when no one tells you the truth about the person that you live with, it shows a level of negligence veering on betrayal. And now the scene is set. We move on to Tuesday night, where the sun had just set over East Kilbride. Inside the flat on Park Terrace, things were escalating. Louise picked up the phone at 10:45 p.m. and then dialed 999. At just 4'11" and barely 9 stone, Louise had no idea that she'd been left in a flat completely unprotected, with a man who had previously stalked, beaten and threatened other women that he'd been in a relationship with. But a small mercy is that he was ushered out of the home by police. However, as we know, this was done with the agreement that he could later pick up his stuff. And as you can imagine, a real slow-motion nightmare is unfolding before us. By the time police finally confirmed what had happened to Louise, Darryl Paterson had already tried to confess twice. His first stop was a friend's house. At 1 a.m. on April 29th, he showed up at Adam Ford's door. He was dishevelled and shaking. Although he was in a state, he was still sober enough to say something chilling. "I've done something really bad. I'm going to go away for a very long time. My life's over." He then stayed the night with Adam. By the time morning arrived, he was now crying. But he still didn't just turn himself in. Instead, he drifted through East Kilbride, drinking heavily, taking substances and spiralling into panic. He went to his sister Kaya's home next, and this time he said it plainly. "She's gone. I've done something really bad." When she asked what he meant, Paterson told her that Louise was in the bedroom of the flat, that she'd had a sharp implement, that there had been an argument, and that she punched me on the throat. He said, "I told her not to do that, but she hit me again. She was kicking me and things got ugly. Suddenly I was on top of her with my hands around her throat." Then, chillingly, he dragged his hands across his neck and added, "And then it happened." He told her that the weapon was in the kitchen and that he'd washed it. Paterson then made multiple calls to the police after that. One time he told them that he had committed a serious offence. Another time he said that he was carrying a weapon. But the system that hadn't flagged him as a serious risk still wasn't catching up to what had already happened. Even when police met with him in person, he wasn't taken into custody. He was sent to a hospital instead, and then released. By the time Louise's family began to worry, she had already been gone for days. Her mother Caroline lived nearby, and she was used to regular text messages and check-ins. But now, Louise wasn't answering. It was just not like her to disappear. On April 30th, police were finally called once again to check on her welfare. This would be their 6th visit to the flat since Louise had called 999, and this time they finally forced entry. Entering the flat set alarm bells ringing, and as they moved further in, the full horror was revealed. Inside the bedroom they found Louise's body. She had been carefully covered with a blanket. 3 sharp implements were later discovered in the kitchen sink, one of them believed to be the murder weapon, although it had been washed. The grief was immediate, but this wasn't just about the loss. It was the preceding silence, the delay, the unthinkable knowledge that Louise had been left alone in that flat, no longer breathing for 2 days, while police officers knocked gently on her door and then walked away. Later, her mother would be told that calling cards had been removed for evidence, but when Caroline visited the flat, there were never any calling cards to be found. When Louise's body was still lying there, the woman who had asked for help, the woman who had waited, the woman who'd been failed over and over again, and for 2 days nobody knew. Or maybe it seems some people never actually wanted to know at all. It wasn't until April the 30th, after Louise's body was finally found, that police located and then formally arrested him. By then, he had already tried to confess. It's not like he was hiding. Instead, he was publicly spiraling, but still he slipped through every single crack. When Caroline was finally told that her daughter was gone, the news was delivered in fragments. Officers didn't confirm it at first. They asked her what tattoos Louise had. They said that a family liaison officer was on the way. Meanwhile, outside the flat, flashing lights and police tape told the entire community what had happened. Friends were already trying to remove tributes from social media, hoping to shield the family from the worst of it. But Caroline already knew. The only thing she didn't know yet was just how bad this truly was. She wouldn't learn the details of her daughter's final moments until court. The family was advised not to view Louise's body, as her injuries were too extreme. There would be no final goodbye, no hand to hold, no face to touch or kiss. This shattered the mother, and then came the second shock. The paperwork, the timelines, and the failures. Mother Caroline learned that police had made 18 separate errors in the week leading up to Louise's demise. She learned that they had formally agreed to warn her daughter about Paterson's violent past, but also that they had failed to deliver that warning due to the missing details in the database. She learned that Paterson was already facing new allegations when he moved into Louise's home, that she had been moved to that flat for her own safety after being stalked by another man. And then, the one fact that wouldn't stop circling her mind, they had 5 weeks to warn her, Caroline said, and they didn't. This mother began demanding answers. Caroline spoke to MPs, to journalists, to watchdog groups. She sat down with senior officers from Police Scotland, where they admitted to her face to face that they had failed. She was told that now some changes had been made. There were new flagging systems, better procedures in place, but that there would be no disciplinary action, no names and no accountability. So Caroline kept on digging. She began pushing for a fatal accident inquiry, which is a formal investigation into the chain of decisions that had failed her daughter. She didn't want sympathy. Now she wanted change. And that's because, as she put it, maybe others can live with that on their conscience, but I can't. What we know about the night in question is this. Less than 1 hour after being told to leave, Paterson then returned. And once inside, he launched a violent attack. He applied pressure to the neck until Louise was nearly gone, and then came the sharp force strike to the neck. By midnight, Louise's time on this earth had already come to an end. She was covered with a blanket, and then Paterson just walked out the door again. Nobody was watching him. Strangely, during those 2 days, even though officers came to her door again, even though they knocked 6 times in total, it took them that long to force entry, even when she didn't respond, not even when it seems like all the signs were there. In January of 2023, nearly 3 years after her death, Darryl Paterson was sentenced to life in prison. He will serve a minimum of 18 years before being considered for parole. In court, Judge Lady Stacey told him she was entitled to look to you for love and support, but you betrayed her trust. You took her life. But for Mother Caroline, that sentence means very little. She still wakes up with questions. She still wonders what could have been done differently. She still fights to make Louise's death mean something. With the inquiry, there may be reforms, but what remains is this. A 33-year-old woman called for help, but she was not warned, she was not protected. That help never came. She spent her final moments alone with a monster in a flat that she was told would keep her safe. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.